An unfortunate beginning to 2025. Like most of you, I was sitting in front of my television at midnight last night doing the countdown with my family, watching the various gatherings that were going on. And when I went to sleep last night, I had no idea that we were going to wake up to this.
As we're approaching the bottom of the hour, I want to get everyone up to speed. We are covering a mass casualty incident overnight in New Orleans. 10 people at least were killed when a truck drove into a crowd of New Year's Eve revelers in the city's world-famous French Quarter. The incident began around 3:15 a.m. Central Time. A man driving a pickup truck drove through some barricades at a high rate of speed, hitting multiple people. At least 35 were transported to hospitals with injuries. The suspect then got out of his vehicle and shot 2 officers. They were hit and are in stable condition. Law enforcement sources are now telling CBS that the suspect is deceased. We are also told that possible explosives were found nearby.
So what do we know so far? We know that this individual was apparently from Texas, rented a car on what appears to be Turo, drove it over to New Orleans, had a long gun, had an ISIS flag on his car, had IEDs, improvised explosive devices, drove through a crowd of people, unalived as many as 10 people that's being reported right now, dozens more hurt, and then got into a shootout with police and actually shot 2 police officers, and the perpetrator was actually unalived during this event. And we actually know who this individual is. We've got this person's name. We know we've got a picture of the individual. Shout out to all of law enforcement in New Orleans for getting this information as quickly as they have. So they're still investigating the case. They're still trying to gather leads, but this just broke moments ago. We think that there are more people who were actually involved.
We're just hearing now from the Associated Press that investigators have reviewed video of 3 men and a woman placing possible explosives around this area. Tracy, this is brand new into our newsroom. Video of 3 men and 1 woman placing items, and it seems as though they are connected to the suspect. Tracy, what do you say to that?
Well, this is very, very similar to the Boston Marathon bombing that was just brought up in the Tsarnaev brothers, where you had 2 of them, right, placing those IEDs. This is not at all surprising because I do think it would have taken multiple individuals to place the IEDs, plan on where that placement would be, as well as then obviously use the vehicle to ram this crowd. But what that also tells me as well is, look, I'm former law enforcement. I think law enforcement is actually doing an excellent job here. But it seems to me that there may not have been explosive sweeps that were done of the French Quarter and of Bourbon Street in particular as a result of securing this area, because part of me does wonder if that explosive would have been picked up by either a dog or a device.
When things like this happen, I'm just always forced to ask myself, what's going on in someone's mind that they would get behind the wheel of a car and plow into a group of people? I mean, our society, we have some very sick people in our society. We've got to figure out a better way to identify these individuals. But we haven't even gotten into this story for even 24 hours, and we already have some finger pointing going on.
Well, we've been talking about the Ballards a lot today, and we wanted to kind of step back and give y'all some sort of visual aid so you can know exactly what we're talking about when we say this. Those are the small movable posts that are on Bourbon Street, and they're meant to block traffic from coming onto the street. What we've seen in photos and videos, and what NOPD said, the driver entered Bourbon Street at Canal, drove about 3 blocks down, and then he crashed a little bit past Bienville, and then that's where the shootout happened between him and officers, and they killed him. And again, what we discovered earlier today is that the bollards that would normally block cars from getting on Bourbon Street were not up overnight. This is old video we have that we took whenever some of those bollards were getting installed and the city was demonstrating how they work. And this is where those bollards would have been on Bourbon Street, near where it meets Canal Street. They weren't up overnight because they had to be taken down and upgraded. This photo is from a city's website showing this kind of new project that they're doing, that they're trying to get done before the Super Bowl, where they're upgrading them.
One thing that I heard in Brian's reporting, the last thing he said was talking about the fear, but also the anger, that these bollards weren't up, that the right protection didn't seem to be in place. They were working on it. That much we know. And for people who don't know what a bollard is, those are those short, thick posts that create a barrier. You know, we see them down on Wall Street. You've probably seen them outside of a bank, retailers. They use them so that people can't ram into a bank or a retailer. And we've seen them in some public areas. Not sure exactly. We've got the cars that Brian Enton talked about, police cars that were used to hopefully try to prevent something like this from happening. But, you know, now looking back at it, I mean, this is going to be a huge part of the story, Tracy.
This is going to be a huge part of the story, no question. And you know what's interesting, Laura, is that these bollards were put up in 2017 in this area in direct response to a vehicle terrorist attack by ISIS in Nice, France during Bastille Day. That's why they were put up. And they were refurbishing them, obviously, because of the Super Bowl and the other activities that you had mentioned. One of the things that they failed to do, the bollards, as you mentioned, at banks and the Capitol, all of those places have them, is they typically do extend through the sidewalks. And that's what they didn't have here. Those police cars did block off the street, but as we saw, this terrorist drove up, and as Brian mentioned, up and around the sidewalk. So these bollards didn't extend past there, these makeshift ones. And in my opinion, that was a security issue that was absolutely missed in this case.
So you hear that from two different news sources, that these bollards weren't up. They were traditionally put up in these areas, like you just heard the reporter say, from a similar incident happening like this in France a few years ago. So this was their response. This was their solution, their preventative solution to keep this thing from happening. And it just so happens, as they were being upgraded for the Super Bowl, someone took advantage of this. And there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. Pay attention to this part of the story, because this is going to continue to come up in this story. And whoever was responsible for taking those bollards down, I can guarantee you that individual is going to be the scapegoat in this event happening. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notification bell. We're going to continue to cover this and other stories that are breaking in the new year. I'll catch you in the next one.